Hello, guys. So it's been a while. It's definitely been a while. But I want to get to a question and a comment that I got in one of my videos by the Real Hayden. Shout out. And I appreciate your support, man. You are awesome. And I appreciate everybody watching right now as well. Feel free to ask 100 questions and I'll get to it. I got a request from one of my best fans. I'm gonna call them my biggest fans, like saying like, oh, like I'm the top celebrity or I'm so amazing. No, I'm saying one of my best fans. So I'm complimenting him because you're one of my best fans, the Real Hayden. It's the truth. It's real. So I appreciate you, man. And he wanted to know something that is very, very interesting, because my transition to being a wrestling fan to MMA fan was something that I never expected. I never knew it was going to happen. And, but it's very fascinating when I think about it, because yes, for years I was hooked on wrestling. There was just, I guess I got to get into my really, really young years, but I guess you could say I was kind of destined to be a wrestling fan. I'm not Cody Rhodes or I'm not Dustin Rhodes, but I was born into it as far as my father. My father was a huge, huge wrestling fan, like big time wrestling fan. There's just some memories that I have of him when I was very young, but I remember him walking through the door one time with I wish I had it here, but maybe I can put a picture. There you go. So yeah, he would come in with these rings, like a wrestling ring with those, masked wrestlers or luchadores, right? I mean, I know what they are, luchadores. But for you guys who don't know, that's basically like Nacho Libre, but real Mexicans. And there were plastic wrestling figures that were like either like this, or like this, or like this, I think. But I think mainly there was one arm like this and one arm the other way. So it worked. It worked because it basically you could do a lot of moves with the arms fixed like that. But basically I remember him walking through the door with the ring, with the ropes, with a wrestler in each side of the rope. Sometimes two on each side because there was 4 sides, right? And I remember just being so excited and so fascinated with it. And so I would play with those things, I would just play over and over and over. And my brother and I would play. We would just have so much fun with that. But I think because my dad was into it, I don't remember him watching it at the house and myself watching it with him, but it must have happened. Another thing I remember is he had magazines. Like he had magazines. And you got to remember, guys, in this day, there was no there was comics, but my dad didn't have those comics. So I wasn't exposed to that. He had wrestling magazines, and I would look at them, see these characters, these bright, big pictures of Ric Flair with a big-ass gold WCW World Heavyweight Championship. You would see Hogan. You would see, Road Warriors who just popped out, man, who looked so cool because you wanted to be like them for Halloween, but they were like that every day. They had the spikes on their, on their shoulder pads. They just look so cool. And then of course, the Steiner brothers. I remember stuff from WCW. I remember stuff from WWF, and so I was just fascinated because it was like, whoa, what is this? And then of course I would wrestle, and I guess everything just maybe got put together. And so my father did not stay in my life, but I must have. When it was my mom, myself, my brother, and my sister, I remember video stores. I remember going to rental stores, and I was always, I guess when we looked around, I was drawn to the wrestling section. And yeah, so I would, you know, I would watch. I would, whoa, Mo, yeah, you bet. I would go and watch. I would go and, you know, see all the wrestling tapes, and I was like, whoa, I remember this stuff. I guess that's how it first started. And I was like, I remember seeing these guys. I remember seeing these guys in the magazines. I remember seeing, you know, maybe on TV when my dad would watch it. If you know, I'm sure you did. And then, and so I would, you know, grab a tape. Let me see if I can find something. I would see this guy on there. Not this yet, because this is before that. But I would probably see. Well, they didn't start making these until later as well. But this one was definitely there. The Royal Rumble. So like, I would see a bunch of this: Hot Rod, Warrior, Bret Hart, and Anvil, the Macho King, and Undertaker eventually. Oh, and of course Andre the Giant. How can I forget him? And of course there's Ric Flair and Jake the Snake Roberts, of course. So I would see that, and I would just get a tape, and I got hooked because of Hulk Hogan. I'll be honest. I remember I don't know what was my first VHS tape I ever rented as a kid. I must have been like 7 or 8 when we were at that point. But eventually I became a Hulkamaniac, just like a bunch of other people. So when that song hit, I was going crazy, and I just was in love, and I was super passionate, and I wanted to see what was going to happen. And it was just so cool, man. He was the biggest superhero of our time. We didn't have that, because let me go back to what I was saying. We didn't have comics in our house. My dad didn't collect comics. But the other thing is, and there was TV shows, but they weren't as popular. Like there was a Captain America movie that was made. There was the Spider-Man cartoon, I guess, maybe at that time. I'm sure the old one though. I don't remember watching that stuff when I was younger. So it just wasn't as popular as it is now, and it wasn't out there like it is now. There's so much now, you know. I don't remember what the timeline is for that. That's for somebody else. But you know, when they started making all the superhero movies, it must have started with Batman, the first Batman. But back then, we had these guys. These were our superheroes. These guys right here were our superheroes. Wrestlers. These were our superheroes. So that's how I saw them. That's what I would watch. And not only would I watch it, but I would also, my brother and I would wrestle. Like, we would wrestle, yes, in games, but we would wrestle on a mattress. We would put the mattress on the floor, and we would give each other suplexes and body slams and body splashes and arm drags, and even do submissions. But of course, not really do submissions. But we because we knew what we were doing. We were smart. But the part that, you know, we did some dumb stuff. Don't get me wrong. We did some really dumb shit. Like, we started putting ladders thanks to the Hardys, and later on anyway. But anyway, so yeah, but my timeline started, I want to say, I was born 1982. So I was a fan. I became a fan in, I want to say, probably 1988, maybe 89. But you know, maybe 90. And then by that point it was like, whoa, it was all Hulk Hogan, right? I was a big time Hulk Hogan fan. Another thing I remember, I got to point out, is let me see if I have it here. In this collection lies one of the, I'd probably say the biggest WrestleMania, in my opinion, that made me a super fan and probably kept me a fan, was WrestleMania 6. Because we had something where it was champion versus champion, first of all. That's enough said. But not only was it champion versus champion, you had Hulk Hogan versus the Ultimate Warrior. And this is what I was going to say. As much as I don't remember what was my first VHS tape I ever rented, but one event that I remember specifically, and I think we watched it live in Houston or Victoria. I think it was Victoria, Texas. I remember us being at my cousin Luis and Nicelle's house, and then my uncle Luis and my aunt Nora's house. I believe it was the day before all the crabs got loose there in the house. And I mean, like, yeah, crabs, like like crabs from the ocean and the sea, you know, like where there was like, we had crabs and they got loose. I've never been more terrified in my life. But the day before that, or I'm probably wrong on that, but whenever it was, I remember I was sitting, it had to be the day before, because if it had been after, I would not be able to sit down comfortably on the floor to watch WrestleMania 6. So it must have been before. But I remember seeing it live, or if it wasn't live, we rented it. But I think it was live. And so talk about the whole world was watching. Like, but you had Hulk Hogan versus the Ultimate Warrior. And at that time, it was two baby faces, the biggest baby faces on the planet, going one-on-one. And it was good guy versus good guy, which wasn't something you saw very often. So it got me captivated, and I was more excited than I've ever been. But leading up to it, we had some great matches that I remember. Demolition beating Haku and Andre the Giant. My brother and I going nuts like all the other fans at the Sky Dome in Toronto. And just being so happy for Axe and Smash. Every time I watch that match, I'm so happy for them because they deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. But so I was, we watched that. And then I remember, just leading up, we had Akeem versus Big Boss Man, the former tag team partners, the Colossal Connection. The Twin Towers. The Twin Towers going to battle, and it abruptly ending, surprisingly, just ending, super surprisingly fast, but still awesome to have that match. It's almost like if we were to have the Warlord versus Barbarian, or Shawn Michaels versus Marty Jannetty, which did happen, but it was a big match. And then and then of course, Jake the Snake Roberts and $1 Million Man stand out to me in that event. Even though it didn't have a definite ending, it was still an exciting match. And then the way it ended was still pretty cool too. It's kind of built up or opened up a storyline for the next matches to come, with the feuds with the $1 Million Man and Big Boss Man and Jake and $1 Million Man, and it was cool, man. And then of course we got the big match, Hogan versus Warrior, and you didn't know who was gonna win. You were rooting for both, but I was rooting for Hulk Hogan more than anybody. And I remember my cousin Tony was always a Warrior fan. So we were both like, we loved when they tag teamed, and they were friends, but when they were going to wrestle each other, I think both of us were, of course, on opposite sides. I was a Hulkamaniac, he was a Warrior. And then, of course, Warrior ends up winning. And I remember being devastated. I was probably crying along with Hulk Hogan when he lost. But that's the event that I remember, the very first event that I remember watching. And because of WrestleMania 6, it made me a fan. And I want to say that's what makes me watch. Because skipping forward, I have to watch a WrestleMania. That's what keeps me a fan. I wish King of the Ring stayed, because that was something that would have kept me a fan more probably. But except that the bad guys always won. I mean, anybody catch that? But anyway, so we had King of the Ring was one of my favorites, but WrestleMania 6 made me a fan for life. I missed a lot of stuff because we didn't have cable, so I missed a lot. I was at the video stores. I would go rent VHS tapes all the time. That's how I kept track of my stuff. But I remember part of the reason why I wanted to stop watching wrestling was because and don't ever do this, but I started caring too much about what people thought. And so I thought I was kind of embarrassed to be a wrestling fan, because, you had that whole thing about how it was fake and, it was lame to be a fan. And it's just, I just got that feeling inside of me where I was like, oh man, I gotta start watching something else. And I had seen a UFC years ago. I had seen, the first UFC, and we rent by rental. I rented the first one, and then I would watch the second. I would watch the third. I watched David versus Goliath. I watched all those tournaments, and then, but I stopped. I must have stopped watching after. I didn't keep watching it. I would watch them, but I don't remember them having very many UFC tapes to rent. It was more like the best of UFC, and so you would watch. So it would have the matches, mainly the ones from the beginning, which were the tournament matches. So I didn't know really I'd say, let me see. I'd say, because Vendetta was UFC 40. I'd say, I think after UFC 14, maybe. I just didn't keep up with it. Like, I just kind of forgot about it. Like, you know, when they started, I guess basically when they started making the rules, I'm not going to say it made it boring, but I just, you know, I guess I got back into wrestling and I was watching wrestling a lot. But it wasn't until I went to a Hastings, and I want to say I was going through, I was wanting to just kind of motivate myself. Like, I was looking for something. I was looking for something because I'd been off a breakup, you know, my girlfriend and I broke up, and I remember almost trying to reinvent myself because I felt like I needed to be stronger. And I wanted to be more confident. I think it was UFC 44 Undisputed, and it had on the cover there was Tito and Randy Couture, and I didn't know much about it. I was just like, okay, I want to see this. I want to see what's going on, and so I watched it, and I remember like seeing, you know, from the beginning, it kind of had a presentation like it was WWE. And the opening, I remember the opening, you know, had the intros where they would talk smack to each other. And then you had the whole bring the pain song, you know, like, how's it go? I'm a champion, step to this, bring the pain, bring the pain. Or, I don't know what it says. Bring the pain. You know, and then it was just like, it was really cool. Like, I love that intro. And so like, step to this, you know? And so like, I would watch that, and I remember I love that. It just reminded me of WWE, because WWE always had those intros too in the beginning, you know, around when the, you know, Attitude Era, I guess, they would start doing those little intros in the beginning where it would tell a story. And so you had that, but then it would show all the fighters, show a bunch of highlights of the fighters and clips, and you know, with the song and everything. And then of course it would show the title, and then it was structured in a way where, okay, this is a championship fight, or this is a 3-round fight, and then, you know, we got this fight next. It would show the guys who were gonna fight, like the pictures of them, and then it would you know, have them walk down. You know, it was very much like wrestling, but it was real fighting, but there was rules this time, but there was championships. All that stuff just made me more, you know, want to be more into it. And so I would watch it, and but I remember that fight, and the storyline behind it was, you know, that Randy Couture stepped up to fight Chuck Liddell for the I guess was interim light heavyweight championship, because Tito Ortiz for whatever reason could not fight. And there was, you know, rumors that some people thought he was scared of Chuck Liddell. Some people thought that he just didn't want to fight his friend. However you see it, you know, it is what it is, right? But so they had the fight, and in that fight, I remember, you know, watching it, and I was rooting for Tito because I remembered him from fighting Ken Shamrock, and how crazy is that? Because I should have mentioned that before, but I remember seeing that fight, this one right here, UFC 40. Yeah, Vendetta should have been the event that made me a UFC fan for life, because I remember watching this, but I didn't get to watch the whole event. Somebody lent me the tape. Somebody lent me a tape of this, and I watched. I don't know if they didn't record the other fights or something, but I got to watch Tito and Ken Shamrock fight. And I remembered years ago seeing him and Frank Shamrock fight, and Shamrock beating him. And so I remember thinking, I was like, well, how'd this happen? But then, of course, I remember, oh, yeah, when he beat Guy Mesger, he beat a bunch of the, like, Jerry Bolander. He beat a bunch of the Lions Den fighters, and then he flipped off, of course. He flipped off, like, I'll do this. But he flipped off Ken Shamrock, and Ken Shamrock got pissed off and in his face. They had to move him away. And I remember watching the fight, and, man, what he did to Ken, when he smashed Ken Shamrock and made him almost unrecognizable, you know, that was a heck of a fight. But I remember, I think actually I might have been, I think at that point, you know what? Okay, I'm sorry, but I think I might have been going for Ken Shamrock, because you know, he was from wrestling. I remember watching it, and he was Ken Shamrock, man, from when he was this, because he was in WWF before he did this fight, and this is when he left. After he left WWF, after being a pretty dominant, or being a pretty cool intercontinental champion, and beating The Rock at WrestleMania as well, and being one of the good guys who won King of the Ring, which to me are big accomplishments. He fought this fight, and I remember, okay, when I got that tape, I was rooting for Ken Shamrock, but I thought Tito was so cool, man. I remember seeing especially the entrance. I love his entrance with using the Limp Bizkit break stuff. Oh, it was just so cool, man. With the techno, the fire, all the pyro and lights and everything. It made me a Tito fan that night. So I don't think I was a fan of Tito until I saw him come out, and I was like, whoa, okay, I think I might be rooting for Tito now, or maybe I'm fine with whoever wins. Well, the fight starts. Ken Shamrock nails him with a right or left. I think it was a right, maybe left, but he rocks Tito. And then from that point, Tito gets the double leg, keeps taking him down, smashes him. There's after a while, he just keeps doing the same stuff, punishing him, like being the team punishment leader that he is, puts it on. And then during the later rounds, he's even beating him on the feet with punches. Ken Shamrock's got no answer, and looks super fatigued. I remember that, and he just broke him. But that made me a Tito fan after that. And then, so when I rented that DVD, UFC 44 Undisputed, I remember watching all of it. And then I watched, I remember I got to point out, of course, in that one, there was also Tim the Maniac Sylvia versus Dan McGee, and Tim Sylvia beating Dan McGee. And it was like, whoa, okay, damn, that was quick. This guy's cool. So I became a fan of him too. And then we got to the main event. And this is the one where Tito was being out wrestled. And that's because Rico Rodriguez had fought Randy Couture before and won that fight. So you would think that Tito, and especially being younger than Randy Couture, that Tito was going to win. But no, Randy Couture from that point on, and probably I would say that was the point where he showed age did not matter. And then he just kept showing it years to come. Like, he just kept showing age is just a number. I'm still a really good fighter, and you're going to have to deal with it. I'm going to keep winning. And he had his wins and losses, but damn, was Randy Couture he is a legend. So after that, but that's what hooked me right there, because I remember thinking, I was like, wait a second, I need to watch UFC 43, which was Meltdown. And that was Chuck the Iceman Liddell versus Randy Couture, because Tito didn't want to fight. This was the one where, and Meltdown, no wonder they called it Meltdown. Guys, Meltdown. It was supposed to be Chuck the Iceman Liddell versus the Huntington Beach bad boy, who was all about fire and flame. You put fire and ice together, what happens? Melt down. I just thought about that right now. I that never crossed my mind until right now. So thank you, buddy. Thank you for getting me to make this video and encouraging me to talk about this, because it's crazy. It's crazy, but I still love you. Since then, so I checked out UFC 43, and then I saw how, once again, I was like, whoa, here's this guy who's a lot older, going down a weight class, going from heavyweight to light heavyweight, having to make a weight cut, fighting Chuck Liddell, who's the baddest man who nobody could beat at that time, was unstoppable and totally the favorite to win the belt. He ends up beating Chuck Liddell and grounds and pounds him, and they he wins the light heavyweight championship. Now Tito comes back at UFC 44 to fight Randy Couture. I don't know how many months later, but they fought. Well, after that one, man, after I saw 43, I was just hooked again. I was like, whoa, I got to keep watching these fights. I need to see I want to watch everything leading up to that. So that's I just shared with you what wrestling event made me kept me a WWF fan, because damn, seriously, if it wasn't for that WrestleMania, there's a big chance I would have stopped watching wrestling a long time ago. I'll get into that in a little bit, but there's a big reason why I stopped watching it, or why I wanted to just completely quit it. But so, and I'll get back to that. But for the UFC, I had to keep watching everything that happened. I was like, dude, let me see the other Randy Couture fights. I want to see what in the heck did he accomplish before that. And then I saw he beat Vitor when Vitor was unstoppable. And then I kept watching the other fights. And I was like, damn, I remember Vitor blowing or running through Vanderlei Silva. And then I watched the other fights. And then I started watching a little bit of Pride. So, but after UFC, maybe after UFC 43 or 44, I saw about this tournament. One of the best damn tournaments I've ever seen. Guys, you know, there was this one which was on pay-per-view. You could watch it on DirecTV, and of course you have to order it, but we had total elimination, I think it was total elimination, and then I don't think they had critical count. I think it was final conflict. Oh no, wait a second. This one was one event, I believe. Well, they had the first one. That's right. Yeah, they had the first one where Chuck Liddell beat Alistair Overeem and all this other stuff. And then Quinton beat Murilo Bustamante, who was the middleweight champion, who left UFC. So that was pretty big right there, man. This is the middleweight tournament. But it made me a super fan of Rampage Jackson in particular, because what he did, what he was able to accomplish. And I'm always going to be a Rampage fan. Always. Love him. But then I also heard that him and Tito were friends, and then I found out about Team Punishment, and then of course, so I've always been a big Team Punishment fan, big Tito and Rampage fan. But so after that, they just kept, I kept on watching I had to catch up on the UFC, and that's what made me a fan going forward. Here we go. This one right here made me a big time fan. And I know it's might not be the best reason, but because of the cover. This cover right here made me just a UFC fan probably for life. And I know it's funny because it's just a cover, but it was also the fights in this card. It's not considered one of the best UFC events, but I can't say enough about the cover. It's one of my favorite, probably my most favorite cover. I love this cover, and because you had Tank. I remember Tank from the old days. He was on there against Cabbage, which was controversial, right? But it ended up being controversial. And then you had Baroni. So I saw the highlights of him, and I was like, whoa! But he fought Evan Tanner in this one, and Evan Tanner should have been knocked out. He was super close to being knocked out, and then he comes back, beats on him, mounts him, and they stop the fight. It's a controversial ending too, so they had to have a rematch later. And they fought. They ended up fighting again, I believe. But this one, it was just super impressive. I mean, you couldn't help but become a fan of Evan Tanner, and of course I stayed a fan of Phil Baroni too. But then you had Matt Hughes with a standing rear naked choke on Frank Trigg. You can see it there, and I like Frank Trigg. I became a fan of Frank Trigg on this one too. So yeah, there was just I think Yves Edwards is on this one too, and he has a pretty cool stoppage. But man, this event just made me a super fan, and I just loved it. I loved it, and then from that point on, well, I just couldn't stop watching them. I mean, dude, and then at that point I was like, dude, I'm ordering pay-per-views. I'm ordering the pay-per-views. I would order the pay-per-views, I'd record them, and then I would make my own DVDs, and then I would still buy the DVDs, as you've seen my collection. So go ahead and check out my collection. I support. I did support them, and I'm still supporting them. But I gotta say, so that's what kind of led me to be go from wrestling to MMA. Hopefully I answered the question. I know I'm kind of all over the place.